Hollywood does not fear change. It fears losing control. Some lives were opened by headlines before consent existed. Others were rewritten by courts, laboratories, or rumor. Bodies became evidence. Privacy became collateral. Visibility arrived early, but protection arrived late, or not at all. These stories are not about transformation as triumph. They are about who owns a life once it is seen. Before we continue, please share where you are watching from tonight and what time it is where you are. Lili Elbe. Lili Elbe was born in Denmark in 1882, at a time when identity was governed by biology, law, and silence. Difference had no language. Medicine offered authority, not protection. From early adulthood, Elbe understood herself as female, but survival required separation between inner life and public role. In the 1920s, Elbe traveled to Germany and underwent a series of experimental gender-affirming surgeries. The procedures were not framed as self-expression. They were framed as medical intervention, debated by doctors, documented by institutions, and scrutinized as case studies. Her body became a site of inquiry before it was treated as a life. Public attention followed quickly. Newspapers across Europe reported on the surgeries with fascination and distance. Elbe was discussed as evidence of scientific possibility, rather than a person seeking coherence. Visibility arrived through medical discourse, not consent. Explanation was demanded before understanding existed. The physical toll was severe. Complications accumulated. Recovery was uncertain. In 1931, Elbe died from post-operative complications. Death arrived before she could live beyond transition, before privacy could be reclaimed, before identity could exist outside experiment. Lili Elbe is often remembered as a pioneer. But her story reveals a harsher truth. Early recognition did not mean safety. Progress was measured in access, not care. The door opened, but the room was not prepared for a human life inside. Do you think visibility drove progress here, or did it turn a body into public evidence? Pete Burns. Pete Burns was born in England in 1959, into a culture that celebrated pop spectacle while quietly enforcing conformity. From early adulthood, Burns rejected fixed definitions of gender, presentation, and selfhood. Identity was treated as mutable, theatrical, and authored in public, not something owed explanation or permission. In the early 1980s, Burns rose to fame as the lead singer of Dead or Alive. His appearance was deliberate, artificial, and constantly evolving. The music industry embraced the image because it sold. Interviews lingered on looks rather than sound. Visibility was welcomed, but only as long as it remained entertaining. As cosmetic procedures accumulated, the relationship shifted. Media coverage turned from fascination to ridicule. Headlines reduced Burns to transformation rather than intention. His body became shorthand for excess, inviting speculation and mockery. Control over narrative eroded as tabloid attention replaced artistic context. Burns spoke openly about manipulation and regret. He described how public appetite encouraged physical change and how each change intensified scrutiny. Self-expression became survival strategy. The line between authorship and consumption blurred. Autonomy narrowed with every headline. By the time of his death in 2016, Burns was remembered more for appearance than contribution. Only later did conversations return to agency, consent, and exploitation. His story exposes a modern cost of visibility. When identity is consumed as spectacle, the person behind it is often erased long before the spotlight fades. Caitlyn Jenner. Caitlyn Jenner was born in 1949 into a post-war American culture that rewarded conformity and punished deviation. Athletic discipline offered structure, certainty, and a public script for masculinity that left little room for doubt. From early adulthood, Jenner understood the divide between private identity and public role, but learned to postpone resolution through achievement. In 1976, Jenner won Olympic gold in the decathlon, becoming a national symbol of strength and clarity. Fame followed quickly. Endorsements, television appearances, and expectations fixed her image in time. The private truth remained compartmentalized. protected by performance, silence, and the belief that success could delay consequence. In 2015, Jenner came out publicly as transgender in a highly produced television interview. The disclosure was framed as revelation, but its scale transformed intimacy into spectacle. Personal alignment became a media event. Support arrived immediately, followed by backlash, politicization, and relentless scrutiny. Visibility brought access, but it also brought control. Jenner was praised for courage while being interrogated for every statement, association, and misstep. Her identity became symbolic, often flattened into ideology rather than lived experience. Understanding lagged behind exposure. Today, Caitlyn Jenner occupies a complicated place in cultural memory. Her transition forced conversations into the mainstream, but also demonstrated how quickly visibility becomes ownership. Her story raises an unresolved question. Can authenticity remain intact when it is broadcast before it is allowed to be understood? Caitlyn Jorgensen. Caitlyn Jorgensen was born in New York City in 1926 into an America shaped by war, conformity, and rigid gender expectations. From childhood, she sensed a persistent misalignment between her inner life and the role assigned to her. There was no language for it, only discipline, secrecy, and the hope that adulthood might resolve what childhood could not. In 1952, Jorgensen traveled to Denmark and underwent gender-affirming surgery. When she returned to the United States, the press announced the story before she could prepare for its consequences. Headlines framed her life as medical novelty. Her body became proof, her privacy collateral. Recognition arrived without consent. Attention was immediate and total. Interviews multiplied, lectures were arranged, newspapers dissected anatomy while ignoring interior life. Opportunity followed exposure, but control slipped away. She was invited everywhere, yet rarely understood. The narrative hardened around a single moment of transition, leaving little space for a life beyond it. Jorgensen adapted to survive. She performed, spoke publicly, and attempted to redirect curiosity toward dignity. The effort was constant. Fame fixed her identity in time, denying evolution and rest. The public remembered the headline, not the decades that followed. Caitlyn Jorgensen lived for years after becoming famous, navigating a visibility she did not choose and could not escape. Her legacy reveals an early media truth. When recognition arrives faster than understanding, it often replaces humanity rather than creating it. Cossey. Cossey was born in England in 1954, growing up in a society that prized discretion and conformity over difference. From childhood, she understood herself as female, but safety depended on blending in. Privacy was not a preference, it was a requirement for survival. After transitioning privately, Cossey built a life defined by normalcy rather than declaration. Modeling offered work without interrogation. In the early 1980s, she appeared in fashion campaigns and secured a small role in a James Bond film. She was visible, employed, and unremarkable in the way she had hoped. Success arrived without explanation because none was demanded. That balance collapsed in 1989 when a British tabloid exposed her transgender history without consent. The revelation came stripped of context. Contracts dissolved. Casting calls stopped. Years of careful construction unraveled overnight. The industry did not debate talent or professionalism, it simply withdrew. Cossey responded through persistence, not spectacle. She challenged legal restrictions in court and continued working where possible. Her fight was not for attention, it was for the right to exist without annotation. Visibility returned later, but it carried conditions she had not chosen. What Cossey lost was not fame. It was ordinary passage through public space. Her story exposes a quiet boundary. Belonging can be granted temporarily, then revoked the moment history is forced into daylight. Do you think normalcy should ever depend on secrecy? Or is privacy itself a right worth defending? April Ashley. April Ashley was born in Liverpool in 1935, into a Britain where identity was something to suppress rather than name. From childhood, she understood herself as female long before language, law, or protection existed for that truth. Survival depended on discretion. Visibility was not a goal, it was a risk. In the late 1950s, Ashley traveled to Paris and underwent gender-affirming surgery. She returned to England determined to live quietly, not defiantly. Modeling and social life followed without explanation. Normalcy at that moment felt like freedom. To be seen as ordinary was to be safe. That fragile balance ended in 1961. A British tabloid exposed her transgender history without consent. Privacy vanished overnight. Modeling work ended. Invitations stopped. Public curiosity replaced personal autonomy. The exposure was not framed as dialogue or understanding. It was presented as revelation, and it carried punishment. The damage deepened through law. Ashley married Arthur Cameron Corbett in 1963. When the marriage collapsed, the courts ruled in 1970 that she was legally male, declaring the marriage void. The decision erased her womanhood in legal terms and shaped policy that constrained transgender lives in Britain for decades. Ashley endured without retreat. She continued living under restriction, refusing disappearance or apology. Her story is remembered not for scandal, but for institutional cruelty. It reveals how privacy, once taken, can be replaced by authority that speaks louder than identity itself. Barbara Stanwyck. Barbara Stanwyck was born in Brooklyn in 1907, into an America where reinvention was celebrated on screen and punished off it. She built a career on strength, restraint, and authority, often portraying women who refused softness and survived without rescue. The public learned to read power in her posture, not confession. Stanwyck guarded her private life with discipline. She offered no explanations, no clarifications, and no access beyond performance. In an industry that traded intimacy for loyalty, silence became her strategy. The absence invited speculation. Rumors followed her success, attaching questions of identity and sexuality without confirmation or consent. None of those claims were established facts. They persisted because privacy created a vacuum the public felt entitled to fill. Headlines did not break a secret, they invented one. The scrutiny said more about appetite than truth, and it framed ambiguity as something owed to explanation. Stanwyck never corrected the record. She continued working, choosing craft over commentary. Her authority on screen remained intact because she refused to negotiate her interior life in public. Control came not from disclosure, but from refusal. Barbara Stanwyck is remembered as a classic Hollywood icon, not because mysteries were solved, but because boundaries held. Her story belongs here not as a transgender narrative, but as a lesson in rumor. When silence is mistaken for secrecy, curiosity becomes intrusion. The question is not what was hidden, but why the public demanded ownership at all. James Dean. James Dean was born in Indiana in 1931, into a post-war America that demanded clarity, stability, and clearly defined roles. From an early age, he resisted obedience, gravitating toward art, acting, and emotional exposure rather than conformity. Identity for Dean was not something to declare. It was something to protect. Trained in method acting, Dean valued interior truth over polish. His performances carried vulnerability that unsettled studios built on controlled masculinity. When films like East of Eden and Rebel Without a Cause were released, he became a symbol almost overnight. The image hardened faster than the person behind it. Off-screen, Dean refused labels. He deflected questions about sexuality and identity, not as secrecy, but as resistance. In the 1950s, speculation alone could end careers. Ambiguity was dangerous, yet openness was riskier. Dean chose neither. He treated explanation itself as a form of confinement. Media curiosity intensified as his fame grew. The absence of answers invited projection. Rumors multiplied, not because facts existed, but because uncertainty demanded resolution. His private life became an open question the public felt entitled to close. In 1955, Dean died in a car accident at the age of 24. Death arrived before definition could be forced. His story froze mid-sentence. Speculation replaced evolution. Possibility was sealed by absence. James Dean endures because he was never resolved. His legacy suggests a difficult truth. Sometimes ambiguity is not avoidance. It is the last remaining form of control. These lives remind us that courage is not always loud. Sometimes it is private, costly, and unfinished. What endures is not spectacle, but the quiet consequence of choosing truth when silence would have been safer. Thanks for watching Hollywood Law Secrets. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit the bell for more untold stories.